should you own the real estate that your business rents? Meaning, if you have an office that your business operates out of, maybe an office, a warehouse, something like that, should you own that piece of real estate, whether it's a residence or a commercial piece of real estate? We're going to talk about a couple examples of businesses that I actually have some kind of stake in, and some of the benefits that they have from owning the real estate. And we're going to talk about some of the pros and the cons of this. And for you as a business owner, or maybe a future business owner, maybe someone who's thinking of starting a business, thinking of buying a business, thinking of getting a loan of some kind or investment of some kind to start or buy a business, hopefully this can help you decide, should you own the real estate too? What are some of the pros and cons? I think the first thing we wanted to hit on are some of the pros. And I'll kind of kick it off here with an example. So one of the companies that I have a stake in, they really, the founder of the company bought the real estate as well. He actually originally owned a few of the buildings on the sides of it, and has made lucrative exits on two of the three that he had. And the value of the property just keeps going up every single year. It's been really, really expanding. It's a spot in a very metropolitan area here in Central Florida that gets a lot of, it's getting a lot of stuff developed around it consistently. It's developing more and more around that area. So as a commercial piece of real estate, it becomes worth more and more every year, really. And so he owns the main building that the business operates out of. Now, he owns it separately from the business. The business pays rent every month. And so he's basically helping finance the loan that he has on the building to own it, or the mortgage on the building. And it's coming from the business. And I think this is a really, really good example of just, a situation where you can have a lot of flexibility. If someone was to come along and make an offer to buy this business, you could sell it either with the real estate and get maybe a bigger paycheck altogether. Maybe you make a profit on the real estate from owning it for a couple of years, and you make a profit on the business. Maybe you just sell the business and you have the business keep renting out for the same price and paying the debt service that you have for the real estate. So you're continuing to build more equity in the real estate. Or if you already have all the equity in the real estate, then you're just continuing to cash flow off of it. So that's just one example of how you can put yourself in a really good situation. And if a buyer comes knocking, then we've got a lot of flexibility there. And, if they want the real estate, it could be on the table for the right price. But if they don't want the real estate, then, the business can still help make the real estate cash flow better.
It's one of those situations where when you see a business listed and they involve the real estate, you have to be careful, because odds are it might be a $5 million ask and 4 of that is in the actual land itself. And depending on the SBA loan that you get, they're only underwriting the business. So again, it heavily depends. If you could afford the loan and the business will cash flow enough to cover all of that, it's usually worth it, because land is a very scarce, land is a finite commodity. There is only so much. So in any case, that's usually a good one. But we find often that a lot of great businesses are sitting on land, and it's a lot of headache to go through the process of wrapping that into the SBA and getting that secondary, the other type of SBA that has it, because it just won't cash flow well. So, and our experience is that owners are happy to figure out a rent payment system with their own business that they sell. They don't mind the business is gone. They're making money off the sale and on the land it sits. So recently I spoke to somebody who actually was looking to sell the business that they owned on the land they owned to then pay off the land that they owned. And then we're going to parcel out the other parts of the land to sell it to a developer. So there's some cases where you're getting guys who bought acres and they're looking to sell off a lot of that stuff. So if you can, yeah, but you will go through a much more scrutinous background check and financial pulling from the SBA if you're looking to get that real estate loan, because that one I think can go up to $50 million loan. So there will be a lot more scrutiny on you on that one. However, if you're just going for the business, usually you can negotiate a deal with a business owner. In one case, some friends of mine who are in Apopka, they're opening up a board game cafe. It's going to be one of those things that they work full-time jobs and they're just going to open it up on the weekends, basically. And they got an SBA loan, they got approved, and they bought the building and the land. And they know they got it all appraised. And from their own estimations, they're building this whole basically abandoned building out. They feel fairly confident that with the build out and completion of the building, once it is done, all in it, they will actually be ahead of whatever may come. So even if they don't do anything, get some weird feedback on your mic over there. I don't know, just some scratching noises. They've kind of done the plan to say, like, once the renovations are done, it's like an actual full building. The estimated value should be over what the loan is. So even in their worst absolute case, they're breaking even and probably also profiting because of the work and the stuff. But that's just very strategic. It's an area that's in development. They know stuff is going up. If you're in the Orlando, Florida area, you know Apopka is kind of blowing up. So it is also a way that you can, and the SBA was willing to give them the money to buy the land. So in those cases, yes, it's definitely a boon to have that either in the price, or if you're starting out, buying it from under where you are to hedge against whatever may come in the business world.
I saw another case where a business owner, it was a law firm that they did own their building as well, and they were renting to their business out of the building that they owned, but the building also had numerous other offices, so they were renting out to their own business and collecting a check, every month for rent from that business, while also owning it. But then they also were renting out to other businesses. So I think that of the rent, 60% or so was coming from other businesses. So that makes for a really interesting type of acquisition target too, if you are thinking about buying that business, because you do diversify your interests a little bit. You have other tenants helping to pay the rent, and you've got some of the value tied up in the real estate itself and the equity of that. You've also got cash flow that's coming separate from just the business that doesn't rely on that business succeeding and you stepping in and running it. And then you've also got the business. And I think in that case, it was probably about 70% of the asking price that was tied up in the actual real estate itself. And it actually made a decent bit of sense because of the situation. But I think in a lot of cases, if you're a buyer and you're looking at buying a business, I think, it really depends on what business you're in. If you're just in the business of, if you want to just buy the business and just kind of keep it steady, stable, and you're planning on holding it for maybe, got my dog drinking in the background, sorry. And maybe you're planning on just holding it for years and years. You want to just hold it for decades and let it continue to stay steady and maintain, and you're not really trying to come in and be explosive and grow it fast, then maybe owning the real estate as well could be a good idea for you, because that real estate is going to appreciate a lot over that time and you might end up getting a good return on it. But if you're going to try to get in and you're going to try to flip the business very quickly, I think it really doesn't make, and maybe you're going to try to grow the business as well, then I really think in that case, it doesn't make a ton of sense to buy the building unless you're getting a really good deal on it for some reason, because I think it's just going to add too much to the debt service that you have to pay every month for the business. And it's going to strain the growth of the business, especially when you think about trying to make any kind of capital expenditures or anything to help grow the business. You don't want that extra debt service cutting into what you're able to do. So it might make a lot more sense to just have the owner keep the commercial real estate as long as you can get on favorable lease terms and just pay that rent every month.
It really is going to be a cash flow situation, I think, in any event. And I always think if you can afford it, land is going to be a good buy. But specifically, I think that when it comes to a business in the land, you have to be doubly diligent, because you don't want to overpay for a slice of land, especially if it's in a more rural area. And I think oftentimes people can get caught up in the, like we were talking about earlier, land is good, land is finite, it's always going to appreciate. Not necessarily. So I think you have to figure out also what that money, if you, let's say you're like, oh, it's only $4 million for the land and the business, great. Well, I would say maybe to that extent, look at a business that is just being sold for $4 million. See what the cash flow looks like. Yeah, you still have to pay rent in this scenario, but the business that is collectively priced at 4 million appropriately with all the extra stuff. You might be like, well, I'd rather just rent and make more cash flow coming in, because odds are a $4 million business is going to be much larger and have a much greater like presence and cash flow to it. So I think you have to weigh that. Are you willing to sit on the land and maybe long-term play it with the, I can sell this off or whatever, have that idea of long-term. Like you said, I think if you're going for a quick quote flip where you're trying to make something happen in a few years, owning the land probably going to be way more complicated and way more debt that you want to take on. But if you're looking to actually develop something, the land is probably a better option, because if you're looking at a long-term horizon, 10 plus years, likely the land will improve. And like I said in the other example, you could also, if it depending on where you are, you can zone and parcel it, sell it to a builder if you got a ton of it. Like, some of these guys, they have these operations that are sitting on 10 acres, they're using a third of it, like a third of an acre, and they got 9 3/4 acres just sitting there. Maybe it's their hunting ground, I don't know, but I know I've seen some crazy listings where like 10 acres and it's valued at like $500,000. I'm like, damn, that is crazy. So it really you really got to figure out your tolerance and your time scope for what you're looking to do with this business. Is it the business or is it the land you're more interested in? Because again, that's going to come down to the factors of also how you're going to be allowed to be lent to as like somebody going to get the money. Look, if you have the cash, what do I know? You have that much money, go do what you like with it. It's clearly working out for you. But for most of us, we're going to need to get funding. We're going to need to get a loan of some kind or some sort of financing. And you have to consider how that's going to look on the paperwork.
I think if you are considering buying the land or buying the real estate too, you should also really know a lot about the area that it's located in. If you don't know much about the area, I'd be wary of making a big swing and a big purchase on that real estate, because, well, you just don't know if it's going to appreciate over time. If you know the area well and you know that it's developing and it has a lot of plans to develop more, and there's a lot of people moving into the area, such as the case with the one that I was describing at the beginning of this episode, then that's a good purchase. That's one that you can kind of rest assured is going to appreciate over time. And, well, you could get, let's say you buy the building, the portion of the loan that goes towards buying the building is $500,000, and you hold it for 5 years. Maybe it's worth $750,000, maybe it's worth $900,000. And you see commercial real estate really, really start roaring in some cases like that, depending on the area that you're in, if it's a very developing area. So it can make a lot of sense, but it's not something that you should just do because you feel like it has to be a package deal. If you are buying a business, you should definitely consider buying them separately or just buying the business.
In a market where it might actually be cheaper to get a loan to buy a business in the land than it might be to get a mortgage, it might be a little bit easier too for some people based on how things are right now. Don't get blinded by the having land is good, I need to hoard land mentality, because you could buy a pile of dirt that the business sits on and it was easier to get approved, so to speak, but it might still just be a pile of dirt in 10, 12 years when you're like, I want to loosen up some capital real quick. So I think just in general, if you don't know the area you're buying in, you've already made a tremendous error in the business you're looking at. If you don't know the town or the city or where they're servicing, you really should do that research before you even touch a business, let alone the land in the area.
Let us know what you guys think in the comments, by the way, too. Maybe if you're tuning in and you are a business owner, if you've been a business owner, if you're thinking of being a business owner in the future, would you want to own the real estate that you rent out of? Do you not really care? Would you rather just lease it? Do you like the flexibility of just having having a lease that you could maybe switch up in, a matter of time? What do you think? Let us know what you guys think. But I think, again, like, to sum up what we've been talking about, I think it really just comes down to like what type of play are you trying to run? Why are you buying the business? Why are you starting the business? Why are you considering getting the real estate that the business operates in? And is that something that's going to serve your long-term or short-term goal?
And also meet yourself where you're at. Whatever you're going to get approved for, whatever you're likely to get approved with, that's what you have to work in the parameters of. I don't think it's worth trying to strain yourself for some land, especially on whatever you're able to comfortably do within the business, just because you think land equal good and number go up. It's a lot more complicated because, again, all those numbers are likely based on business cash flow, and you should always be looking at it. What's the absolute worst case, and how do I pay my bills and my people, just in case? So if you run that, you still have the money for the whole loan. Good, you've done great. But if there's any question about that, a business that's worth $1 million, that's cash flowing 350, 400K, that's about, I'd say, where a lot of those are. And then you add on the $2 million plot of land under it. Okay, well, does that really even make sense at that point? So you got to be looking at the whole picture. And I think for most people, it might be very it might be a little bit underwhelming when you look at the numbers with the real estate. But once you cut it out, just eat the rent. Most business owners will have a rent in mind. They'll usually say, even if they have land to sell, owner is willing to rent land. That number is going to be a lot more favorable too. And then down the road, call them up and say, look, I put aside X amount. How much do you want for the place? You can always do that later, because odds are a second sale is something they're going to be amicable to.
Sure. So, again, let us know what you guys think. Also, if you are someone who owns the real estate with your business, let us know in the comments why you decided to do it. Let us know why it was important to you, or let us know if you think it was a giant mistake. Those failures are worth sharing too. But in the meantime, consider it deeply when you are thinking about owning the real estate with your business, because it's a big decision and it should be based around what you're trying to do. But until the next time, we'll see you guys next Tuesday night. Do this every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and let us know what you want us to talk about next.